We're going to be going into objective 1.5, which is given a scenario, use the appropriate Microsoft command line tools, which we see here. Where's my mouse? Give me my mouse. There we go. And they break it up into categories: navigation, network, disk management, file management, and informational, and then OS management. On the current versions of the operating systems, if I hit the Windows key and I type in shell, there's actually several options that you can use. Microsoft Windows PowerShell is their very powerful scripting language. The file extension for PowerShell files, if you're going to save PowerShell, is .ps1. Okay, so that's a very, very common scripting language. I've been using it for years. It's probably my go-to. And then a lot of these questions are asking for commands that are supported under the traditional, what's called the command prompt. And so the command prompt, which you see here, is listed here. Almost everything, if not everything, I'm saying almost for safety, that you could type into the command prompt, they put support in typing it into the Windows PowerShell session. But they went ahead and added another one called terminal, and this may or may not be on your system. If you do have this, I do recommend trying it. So typically for this class, for these questions, I'm going to be wanting to do things that I need to be an administrator on. So I'm going to go to terminal. I'm just going to show you terminal in case you have it. And this run as administrator. This terminal, the reason I really love working with terminal is because the default, and you can change that, it's opening a PowerShell window. So this is automatically in PowerShell. But I can add a tab like this just by clicking that plus sign. And it's like a browser, but it's another tab. And then I can click the drop down and I can say, make that a command prompt. Okay, so that opened a tab as a command prompt. And this is a traditional command prompt, and it honored that I'm running it as administrator. If I see administrator colon, this is running as administrator. So the things that we're covering in this objectives, all of these, they're calling them Microsoft command line tools. And if I, for example, if I type like WinVer, okay, so if I type that in and I type it here in the command prompt, WinVer, it opens up and shows me the Windows version. If I go into a PowerShell window, so this is a PowerShell shell, and I type in WinVer, it does the same thing. But there are scenarios where you'll want to go into one or the other. If they don't specify PowerShell, they're probably wanting you to know how to do this in a command prompt. You can either use terminal like I did here, or you can go hit the Windows key, type in command, and this is the old traditional command prompt. It's been in here since the DOS days, when that was the OS basically. And typically I'll choose run as administrator. If you don't choose run as administrator, then there's certain things that you can't do, and that just gives you an idea. So before we do that though, what I want to do is I want to just go over a couple of practice questions for 1.4. Now that you've had a couple minutes to rest, let's do a couple practice questions, then we'll get right into the 1.5 slides specifically. But let's look at this. A system administrator notices that a Windows 10 computer is running slowly and suspects a specific application is consuming excessive CPU resources. Which tool should they use to identify and terminate the problematic resource? So again, in this particular case, it's possible that there may be more than one answer, but the one that's the most obvious here is Task Manager. You can go to the Processes tab. You can view and manage processes, including identifying applications consuming high resources and terminating them. All right, a technician needs to schedule a weekly script to run automatically on a Windows 11 system to perform maintenance tasks. Which Microsoft Management Console snap-in should they use to configure this automation? And then, is it A, B, C, or D? And the answer there is B, Task Scheduler. And remember, we have built-in tasks and custom tasks. A user reports that their Windows 10 computer is running low on disk space. Which tool should a technician use to remove temporary files and free up storage space? And this is one I mentioned. I would suggest that this is a good solution for this exact scenario. But if you're running into a scenario where the hard drive, you're trying to reclaim every little piece of space like this, you can run Clean Manager, Clean MGR, and you can get rid of those, temporary files and reclaim some space. But you're definitely at a spot where you probably need to look at adding some hard drive space, because if it's to that point, you're probably where you need more hard drive space, realistically. All right, a technician needs to troubleshoot recurring system crash on a Windows 11 workstation and wants to review detailed logs of system and application errors. Which tool should they use to access these logs? So far, of all the practice questions that we've had, I would say that these are probably the closest. They're not the actual questions. I don't want anyone to think like, first off, I made up these questions before I took the test. Okay, so they're not the actual questions, but I was happy to say that after I took the test that I was very happy with these several sets of questions, these being one of them. The answer is the event viewer, and then we have the different categories of logs. All right, a technician's configuring a Windows 10 system and wants to disable specific applications from launching at startup to improve boot time. Which feature of Task Manager should they use for this setting? Well, that's the answer's right there. I didn't mean to go so fast, but it's C, Startup. The Startup tab allows you to view and disable applications that will occur at startup. So that is 1.4. We're in 1.5. I talked about terminal versus the command prompt, running as administrator, PowerShell. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through every command listed in the objectives. If we look at the objectives, they actually list quite a few commands. They list navigation commands, network commands, disk management commands, file management commands, informational, and OS management. I'm going to go through each one. On the slides, it looks like this. They're going to look like this: CD, change directory. And we have different things. What is the high-level description of what it does? Sorry, you guys didn't see that. What is the high-level description of what this command does? What are some common usage or parameters? And what's an example? I'm not going to do the examples in the interest of time, but I recommend in a testing and demo environment only, by the way, that you do run through after class and practice, get experience with some of these commands, and just go through and spend, if you spent for each of the commands 5 to 10 minutes, especially if you did that a few times, you should be fine for the exam. CD is change directory. You change the current working directory. One of the things that you may get asked about on this exam is you may be presented with a scenario where they give you a series of like in the command prompt, and they'll have like maybe several lines that I can't give you what the exact question is, but give you an idea. And they'll say like, all right, what would you type in here to go from what's listed here to what's listed here? And so that's the thing, if you get a question like that, don't overthink it. Like, read where you are, look at what the next line is, and go, how would I get there? If it's for example, I guess I am going to do an example. I can't help myself. If I'm here and the next line says, the next line here, they show you says C:\Windows. And the options, one of the options is CD space ... Then I would pick that option. Does that make sense? What command do you type here to go from this to this? That may be the, I don't even know why that one in there. So that would be an example of something, a type of question you may get asked around these concepts. So just to give you that idea. All right, and then there's an example. What about directory, dir? Dir gives you a listing of the files in the current directory, files and folders. There are some current parameters. So it shows you dir. If you put dir space /p, it will pause after each screen of output. So if you have a really, really deep file, it will allow you to kind of scroll through by hitting page down. dir /a shows hidden in system files. Okay, so if you type in dir /a:/h for just hidden files, and that is a level of command they may want you to validate that you know. You don't have to know all the switches, just a couple of highlights. IPConfig, you'll want to know IPConfig. You'll want to know IPConfig /all, which gives you detailed IPConfig information. And then you may want to know about IPConfig /release and renew. So if you're having an issue and you want to get a new IP address from the DHCP server for whatever reason, you can type in IPConfig release, and then once that executes, IPConfig renew, and it will make a new request for a new IP address from the DHCP server. If you're doing development, you'll find yourself probably running IPConfig flush DNS. If you're working on development, a lot of times to make sure you get a fresh version of DNS, especially if you're launching new public addresses and things like that. IPConfig all gives you all of the IP information on that particular machine and all the network devices. Ping is test connectivity between two hosts. That's all you probably need for that. You can ping your local address, your 127.0.0.1. That is called localhost, and that will test the TCP IP configuration on that network interface card and make sure that it works correctly. But typically ping is going to be to communicate and get a signal between two hosts. Netstat allows you to display network connections, listening ports, routing tables, and network statistics. It's used for analyzing when your system is communicating over the network. NSLookup is a tool to query the domain name system and troubleshoot name resolution. And then there's, of course, examples there. You can look for specific types of DNS records like MX or TXT or A records. You can do that. This is NSLookup, Akka name server lookup continued with a couple of examples and a couple of flags. Net use is to map or manage shared network resources. You'll almost certainly get asked a question where they're asking you to analyze a command, or they give you a scenario where you want to have a startup script that will automatically map network drives and run them every time the computer starts up, and that one would be net use. It's the command that has the closest possible name, net user, okay? But net use is the one for shares and for mapping network drives. Traceroute gets you detailed information about the path and devices that your request goes to a remote host. Typically, every router along the way will give you information about that path. And then PathPing sort of combines the functionality of ping and traceroute. PathPing, and then you like controlflowcorp.com. So that's a website that we own. So if I go to my demo machine and I type PathPing controlflowcorp.com, then you can see it's going through all of the details of how this request is going and each hop, and looks at the path and what's happening. So PathPing is more than just ping and kind of a combo of both ping and trace route. Okay, for disk management, we've got check disk. This scans a drive for errors and bad sectors. A lot of people will run check disks through Task Scheduler. Let me go back here, sorry. A lot of people will go through check disk through Task Scheduler and have it run at night and make sure that all the hard drives don't have any, errors. It's just a way to look at those. You can also look at file system errors with the /F flag, and you can do different things, full repair, and if you run this, it will do a full repair check disk. This does take time. Sometimes it takes quite a while depending on the hard drive. Be very careful with drive commands, like don't just type in format. Do not type in just format. This is to be used when working directly with drives, formatting drives, things that you could do through the disk utility, but you're using the command line. DiskPart is a disk partitioning utility. Again, this is something to be used with caution. You can accidentally do some damage, but I went ahead and put a table together of the command and then, what those different commands do and whether it's safe to run or not. As far as file management, we're going to be working with MD, which is make directory. You can also use mkdir. These do the exact same thing, MD or mkdir. Then you put the name of the folder. That's making a directory. The mkdir and MD do the same thing. File management, rmdir or rd, remove directory. Again, used with caution. And then there's a couple of common flags. Robocopy stands for robust file copy. I feel like every O2 exam that I've taken, they asked me a question to make sure I knew about PathPing and Robocopy. Robocopy's advanced file and folder copy utility. It supports retries, mirroring, multi-threading, detailed logging, and it's often used in automatic scripts that are word for backup or migrations. So Robocopy is very, very commonly used tool. There's three: Robocopy, Copy, and Xcopy. Robocopy can preserve NTFS permissions on the files that make it very popular if that's something that you want to be preserved. Copy and Xcopy do not retain file system permissions. They typically inherit wherever it is that they're dropped off at. Informational. So these are informational. You've got host name, net user, winver, who am I, and then a little bit about help. Net user is the command that you can use to modify and view accounts on a particular computer. It's useful for managing local users from the command line. Typically, sysadmins in Active Directory are going to be using PowerShell commands for Active Directory. WinVer opens up that window to show you the version of Windows and licensing information about a particular machine. Who am I shows the currently logged in user, and it can be very useful depending on what you're doing. If you do who am I all, you'll see all the current username and detailed information of group memberships, privileges, domain details, and it can be very useful for troubleshooting. You may be asked about how do you get help information for a command, and one of the ways is to put the command name space /?. So this will show information about a command. So if I go over to my demo machine, I'm going to clear the screen by typing in CLS, and that will clear the screen. I'm going to type ping space /?, and then this gives me all of the information about that command. It's like a built-in help system for that command. For operating systems management commands, GPUpdate, GPResult, SFC. GPUpdate is typically run in order to enforce or immediately activate group policy updates at the domain level. It's very common for sysadmins, for domain admins, to make a big group policy update. And rather than wait for the next time that particular machine logs onto the domain or restarts, wait for some events that cause it to refresh the group policy, they'll go through and do a force GPUpdate with a force, and it will get the latest and greatest group policies. That's like a very, very common thing to do. I have several scripts in my demo environment that go through all of the connected machines, restart them, and then run a GPUpdate, force, and then restart them again just to make triple sure. So that's very, very common. There are some flags: force, target computer, target user, wait, log off, and boot. GPUpdate force, that's the one I've used most often, and like I have used that quite a bit. GPResult gives you a detailed report about the currently applied policies that are affecting whatever the user and whatever the logged in user in that particular scenario is being applied to them. Can be very helpful. SFC, System File Checker. This will scan and repair corrupted or missing Windows system files. This is something that you will use quite a bit if you get into deeply troubleshooting. For example, where someone can't find, it says operating system not found, or it begins to launch and it goes right into a blue screen of death. This is often something that you can run quite easily. Boot into a safe mode with a command line, run SFC space scan now, and it will scan all protected system files and replace any corrupted ones. So this is a very, very popular tool to use, and you'll probably get asked questions on the exam where you would want to choose SFC scan now. Here's an example of a scenario. A user reports that their Windows 11 system's slow to boot, the start menu won't open, and some built-in apps like File Explorer crash randomly. You already tried restarting the machine. You tried booting into safe mode. You tried running disk cleanup. You checked Task Manager. At this point, you're suspecting corruption in critical Windows system files. This is where System File Checker comes into play. You run SFC space / scan now. The scan now parameter scans all protected system files and automatically replaces corrupt or missing ones with cached copies. It works while Windows is running. No need to reboot or enter recovery mode unless system files are severely damaged. So this would be a scenario there. And that is all the objectives, all the different command line tools. Let's try some questions for 1.5. Again, please take this overview, and then before you take the exam, you can use the slides as reference. You can just use the objectives document as reference. In a testing and development environment, not in production. Please don't do this in production. Make sure you're in a safe testing environment where if you mess up, you could reset the image of the virtual machine or something. And try to spend 5 to 10 minutes with each of the commands that makes sense to do so. Otherwise, just review what they do. And I think you'll be fine if you do that. For me, because as I mentioned before, I do have a slow learning processes. For me, I would do that and have done that and did do that for 5 to 10 minutes per day for a couple weeks before I took the exam. And that worked for me. But you almost certainly don't need to invest the same amount of time I needed to invest. All right. A technician needs to navigate to a subdirectory named Documents within the current directory on a Windows 10 system, sorry about the spacing there, using the command prompt. Which command should they use? They need to get to documents. CD space documents, that would work, okay. A network administrator's troubleshooting connectivity issues and wants to verify the IP configuration of a Windows 11 system. Again, sorry about the spacing. Which command line tool should they use to display this information, the IP configuration information of a Windows 11 system? B, very good. Thank you guys. Very good job. IPConfig. All right. A technician suspects that a hard drive on a Windows 10 system has file system errors. Which command should they use to scan and repair the drive? Of those options, check disk. It's interesting because it said file system errors. If it said Windows system errors, I might want to look for SFC. If I saw SFC, I probably would have picked that, but I didn't include that on purpose. So out of those, it would be check disk. A user needs to create a new folder named Backups in the current directory using the Windows command prompt. Which command should they execute? That is going to be MD backups, make directory. They could also use mkdir space backups. All right, a technician wants to verify the group policies applied to a specific user on a Windows 11 system. Which command line tool should they use to generate a report of the applied policies? You're trying to generate a report here, not affect a policy. They're not trying to apply a policy. They're trying to see what is being applied. Very, very good. C, GPResult. And that takes us to the end of 1.5, and we have covered quite a few things. I'm going to go back to the objectives just to verify. I'll shut my command window. Again, if you have access to a safe demo environment, try all these. Spend 5 to 10 minutes with each one. Understand what they do and what would be the best option. Not in production. Please don't do that in production. And then that should be enough for this exam.